So I'm assuming since you're an advanced synthesist that you have, at the very least, a rudimentary knowledge of subtractive synthesis and how oscillators function. But we're still going to go over some of the basics and some of the more advanced features of analog-style oscillators so that we know what we're working with when we start getting into the sound design, and I don't drop any terms on you that might sound weird or alien. So oscillators are the basic building blocks of synthesis, and in this video we're going to go over some of the variations of basic oscillators found in virtual analog synthesizers. Later on in this series, we're going to go over other sound sources, for example, FM, granular, wavetable, etc. But for our purposes, starting with these fundamental oscillators and their variations, will provide what we need to get into some of the more advanced features of synths. So virtual analog, or VA, is a term for the emulation of a real-world analog synth, or an aspect of that synth, usually the oscillators. For example, although Native Instruments' Massive and Camel Audio's Alchemy are decidedly digital synths with their wavetable and sample synthesis functions, they both contain banks of VA oscillators, which are designed for traditional applications. There are several common waveforms most often found in VA synthesizers. In general, these are saw, pulse, triangle, and sine. When I demo these oscillators out for you, I'm going to use the synths that are found in F-Expansion's Synth Squad, mainly because Synth Squad has a really nice visualizer built into it. Besides sounding great, this allows you to get a really good visual representation of the effects of modulation on waveforms. So first we're going to start off with the saw. Sawtooth waves are dense in harmonics and are really well suited for basses and leads. One of the most common oscillator waveforms, they can sound really big and fat by themselves, especially when distorted a little bit, but they also benefit from layering and detuning to create beating effects for really big impact. This is a classic sound and is one of the foundation elements of really big dubstep and drum and bass leads and basses, in particular what we call Reese sounds. So pulse waves can have anything from a nasal quality to a hollow tone. The balance between the high and low points of the cycle of the waveform is referred to as the pulse width. And oftentimes a pulse wave with 50% balance is referred to as a square wave. So here is a square to start off with. And here's a pulse starting off balanced and then with its width being swept manually. Pulse width modulation is a great way of creating vocal, vowel-y motion within a sound. When the pulse width of a wave is modulated by an envelope, the wave's width sweeps from one value to the other, landing on the sustain level and staying there. When the pulse width is modulated by an LFO, a continuous, sometimes hypnotic morphing motion is heard. This can be a slow cycle, useful for basses and drones, as indicated here. Or at higher rates, it can take on a chaotic quality, which is really useful for leads and mid-range synths. If your synth is capable, there's no reason why you can't choose to use both modulation sources. In this case, in Synth Squad's strobe, the envelope is sweeping the pulse width according to the values that we've set for it, but it also provides the center point for the LFO modulation. The LFO mod orbits around the value of the sweeping envelope by whatever amount we choose to define. Certain synthesizers allow for this type of modulation to be applied to other types of waves, with the saw usually yielding the best results. If this is available to you in your synth of choice, definitely try it out. Last but not least, I'm going to talk quickly about triangles and sine waves. So triangles and sines are lower in harmonic content and have a bit of a mellow quality. They're useful for layering underneath complex tones as subbasses, or for providing low harmonic body to a lead or a pad. For example, here's a distorted square wave, followed by the same square wave again, with a sine wave layered underneath to form a sub. Distorted, they can actually be dense and are integral to creating balanced tones. They can also provide a great source of deep noises for percussion creation. Noise generators are an extremely useful but often overlooked source of sound and modulation. As a sound source, they can be added to an existing tone to provide a little bit of grit or fuzz, and benefit from being high-pass filtered to shave out any interfering lows. Here's the same distorted square bass tone that we were playing with in the last example, but with a little bit of noise added to the top end. Notice how it creates a sort of industrial sound and provides a little bit of extra grit. With an envelope applied to a noise generator's volume with no attack and a very short decay, the noise generator adds a quick sibilant pluck to the start of the sound, sort of reminiscent of a stringed instrument or a percussive instrument. Noise generators also make an interesting source of modulation. If you were to freeze the output of a noise signal at any point, the value in hertz would be random. And as a result of this, noise is often used to generate random values for sample and hold devices and modulation generators. We're going to touch on this later on, but in the meantime, just think about R2-D2. So these are some of the more advanced aspects of basic analog style oscillators. Now that we've finished this overview, we've got a few tools in our belt, and so we're going to be able to start designing some patches before we get into some more advanced stuff.